whether it's wealth in silver and gold or it's the wealth in commodities that they're extracting that give their country economic value. We are extracting not only the resources, but their labor costs by the suppression.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Silver's use in the military goes almost completely unnoticed, and it's rarely even mentioned by market analysts. When silver is acquired by militaries and is used to make components for vehicles, gear, or weapons, it effectively disappears from our radar as civilians. But for today's episode, we have a special guest joining us. He knows more about this topic than anyone else out there. He is also the creator of Silver Wars. He is the one and only Illuminated Ape. It's also an honor to have Oren Elbaz, also known as the Silver Hermit, back once again for our bi-weekly collaboration. He is a market analyst and sound money advocate. You can find links to their accounts in the description. Modern militaries require a lot of silver, but a pretty substantial amount of silver was used way back in World War II. What would your estimate be of how much silver was used in World War II?
Uh, so the public record suggests that it's between 800 to 700 to 900 million ounces, right? Um, and this is a combination of the fact that during World War II, industry didn't really exist, gentlemen, right? It was all mobilized for the war effort. So everything that was created during World War II can only be counted as military usages because all not essential civilian usages for silver were non-existent at that time.
hmm
That's
Now,
interesting. So with just 8 to 900 million ounces of silver, that's basically a little over 1 year of the global mine supply. For example, the global mine supply last year was about 819 million ounces. Would you say that estimate is for all of the militaries involved, or is that more specific to the U.S. military?
so that's these statistics that we're getting from Metals Focus and Silver Institute, they're not complete. We know this because we can look historically at them and see that they're history revisionist. Now, if I was a betting person, I would say just based on that, they were false. But I have had conversations with Di Lorenzo, the director of the Silver Institute, where he has tried to conflate that the brazing is not a part of the military usage, even though the brazing category is there's a ton of brazing in the military. So they're not telling us the truth. The reality of the situation is completely obfuscated, and it's done intentionally so that the public doesn't know how the supply of silver is doing, which is constantly throughout the history of what we do know has suffered severe shortages in the last 100 years.
let me put it this way. In terms of percentage, what percentage of silver, which is consumed in industry, in your opinion, goes to the military?
All of it, technically. Now, I know it's kind of like really all of it, but technically, all of industry today is an extension of the military industrial complex. So all of it is the correct answer if we're being technical. Now, how much of it is actually being purposed for war? I would say in the last 10 years, this has exponentially gone up. Since maybe the last 20 years, since 9/11, this has gone up magnitudes. It just depends on how much conflict in the world is, how much you can extrapolate is how much is being used, as well as technological advances of energy, as well as advancements towards science. Is it possible to know? Unfortunately, not, because they don't want us to know. But I would say by estimates that we're using more than we produce for a very long time.
So you think the official numbers are bogus?
Absolutely unequivocally bogus
And low.
and low. Because look, gentlemen, and this is something that they have to agree with. You can ask any AI in the world. It's what how is the silver counted? And technically, it's only what's counted on the refineries. It's whatever the refineries, and there's not many in the world. So these things could actually be realistically controlled. And these are the entities that tell us, Metals Focus, whomever, how much silver is refined, but they're not counting the metal that's refined potentially from all these classified military locations and satellite states of other countries and whatnot. There is a Because of the nature of this, of it being silver or any commodity, it has the ability to be smuggled as long as governments turn a blind eye. That's the reality of the situation. So there is just a very opaque amount of problems here, gentlemen. And when I see opaque and I can't see through anything because there is literally no oversight for this problem, that means the problem is way worse than what we possibly would know. And that's also what and why that the situation is the way it is, because if it's this bad, that means it would cause public panic.
Could you give us a few examples where silver is used in military applications and some numbers?
Sure. So, silver, by its nature, is the best electrical conductor. It's the best thermal conductor of any metal, and then it's the best reflector of light, of any metal. So, by those natures alone, you can imagine that the amount of usages is quite astronomical. It has a lot of magical properties, even, and I say magical, but medical would be the more apt word. But in a lot of ways, it's kind of amazing that a piece of metal can deter germs. That's kind of like, wow, that is sort of a magical nature element of this of this metal. So if you can extrapolate from that, just from a common sense perspective, all of the usages that could be under research right now or have been produced in the last 100 years of technological development, there's a lot here. Now, to be getting into specifics for military, uh, silver has the property to help shield your wiring from interference from the enemy. That's what it's, I've found USB cables that have silver shielding on it, USB 2.0, 3.0, whatever they need, they're going to get it shielded because that's the standard of all cables now in the DoD. They have to be shielded so that they don't get interfered with by enemy interference of whatever kind, radar, wavelengths, guys, whatever. Then there's people mostly know about the usages of silver in batteries. Sure, there's multiple different kinds of batteries. There's the silver zinc batteries, which is, can be very small in the size of a watch battery, all the way to a giant silver zinc battery that is used to store energy for submarines. All right. And those could be multiple tons, hundreds of tons to, something that weighs less than a gram in your watch. So it all varies. And in most cases where you're using the tonnage, you can recover about 90% of that silver after the fact, remake the batteries for the submarine or the war battleship or whatnot. But you do lose a little bit in the process of its recharging over and over and over again. I don't know where it goes, but studies say we lose a little bit. Okay, that's fine. But it's the problem of silver bottles down to the little bits that are used. And in the military and everywhere in technology, the little bits are what have compounded into the problem that we have today. So right now you're looking at me, and we're having a Zoom call on and you're looking at me on a monitor. That monitor it doesn't have a lot, but it has less than 3 grams of silver in it in order to project my image to you. In your phone, there's probably less than 2 grams. In your GPU, the GPUs that have been existing on the market since the 90s for computers, even before that with arcade machines, they have several grams in them. Now, if you compound, and they get more grammage as the technology progresses, and then they start getting a little more conservative with it in more modern times. But generally speaking, this is compounded, especially for the fact that most things aren't recycled. So either the military is using it to blow it up or sending it to space, or consumers are consuming it in such small quantities and not properly recycling it and putting it back into the supply chain where it ends up in landfills. It ends up in unknown, and I mean unknown because less than 25% of worldwide e-waste is recycled, less than 20% in the United States. We don't know where a grand majority of all of this small, minute silver is, to where it might as well just be lost. And it is lost at this point. So, what is the available silver is only what actually is refined on a daily basis and what stackers hold right now. And that's where we are right now. That's how bad the situation is. And we can get into whys and whatnot of that, but yeah, that's the damage that conflict in the world has done to this one commodity.
Yeah, I could see a situation in the future where they're literally mining through all the old garbage pits, all the old landfills, trying to get little bits of silver once the supply crunch really hits heavy. And that is interesting that they want to use it to shield all of the cables today. That's a use that could easily be overlooked, and every little bit adds up, like you had mentioned.
And this has been going on for a long time, gentlemen. This has been World War II technology. We were advanced enough to know that this was something that we needed, and eventually we adopted as a standard. So I think, for the silver shielding, that's at least been since the late 70s, early 80s, that's been a standard that every subsequent cable that would have to meet the specifications to even be bought by the government has to have. So yeah, you remember Independence Day, the movie, when that old father of Jeff Goldblum's character was complaining about the golden toilet or whatever. It's basically this, right? But with silver, they're wasting all of the silver and they don't have any responsibility for what they're doing.
The military today uses silver for missiles, night vision goggles, torpedoes, and you had mentioned the silver zinc batteries.
Mhm.
How common are these batteries, and how much silver would you guess might be being
In
used just for these silver zinc batteries?
it completely all varies. I can't give you a straight answer on the how much
Okay.
because they could be using the battery for one particular motor in the rocket, or one particular aspect of the rocket's guidance system. Every one of these aspects or components of a rocket have their own separate power. And the really critical components are powered by silver batteries. Uh, when you cannot trust the thing to fail, more likely they're using a silver battery just because of the reliability of that. It was not a lithium battery that got our astronauts home on Apollo 13. It was a silver zinc battery. All of the batteries used in NASA are silver zinc batteries because of their reliability and high energy density. Weight's a big concern getting things up there, right? So it's also a big concern for missiles, and that shared you know advantage for silver zinc batteries is shared throughout all different applications, from little bits to a lot. So if you're looking for a example of a lot, those are the torpedoes, not so much the missiles. The torpedoes I find have utilized silver aluminum or silver magnesium. And silver magnesium specifically is very fun because if you're shooting this torpedo in salt water, the salt water itself acts as the electrolyte that activates the battery so that these things can have an indefinite shelf life.
Oh wow, that's really interesting.
So it really depends on the applications. I can't answer that, but for hundreds of pounds for a torpedo to get that mechanism and property working, those are the heavy lifters right now, the heavyweight torpedoes, the medium weight torpedoes, and to a lesser extent, the small weight torpedoes. They all have silver in them for their electronics and whatnot. So they're all using silver. Every missile munition uses silver if it has a brain. If that munition has a brain, it uses silver. But in torpedoes, in water aquatic domains, it could use a lot more.
I guess Eagle Pincher, if I'm saying that correctly,
Yes.
is the primary producer of these batteries. Is
So
that correct?
right now they have a monopoly. because there was a five or so companies that specialized in these batteries that I have come across. Could have been more, but those are the main ones. And over time, they just get consolidated into one because a major thing with these batteries is that they have no consumer application. They are only military. They are highly secretive. In fact, there's embargoes and sanctions, so these particular batteries don't end up in the hands of, say, Iran, because they make ICBMs possible.
Right. And we definitely don't want them to get their hands on that.
Right.
And it sounds like Eagle Pincher has produced a lot of these. Um,
And for both military and NASA and space applications. So they are busy.
would you say that there's any chance that um, there was a possibility that Iran might have gotten their hands on one or multiples of these batteries at some point in the research you've come across?
Yeah, so there was a guy named Christopher Tappan that was charged by the government for illegally exporting silver zinc batteries to Iran. That's on the record. He got really in trouble for that. Basically, one under treason. Their governments don't want you to do that. That's how dangerous that getting these silver zinc batteries into the wrong hands are.
And I must ask, where are you getting all that data? Because it seems like stuff that wouldn't normally be published openly.
Right. So it's very difficult to find. And what it requires is going into the military domains, the .gov domains, and there's a lot of websites that people have no idea exist that are just basically dumps, data dumps that the government hopes no one looks through. That you can't keyword search. You have to manually go through with your eyes. There's no ability for AI to scan these things. And in some facts, you have to actually download them in order to actually view them, or use some sort of codec or program in order to access this data. They don't want you to see this data, but they made it available because lawfully they have to, but they're going to make it as hard
Mhm.
as possible for you to see it. But also, a lot of mistakes have been made. I can imagine there's things that I have been reading that they probably rightly should have kept classified. I don't understand why they wasn't. For example, how many applications the silver zinc batteries have? Well, it's over 2,000 as of 2017. That per a document that I had, something around like 22 or something, if memory serves. And their objective was to keep these silver zinc batteries readily available until 2030. So their plan, if it was modified in any way since then, I don't know. But their plan at that time was to hopefully be able to phase out these batteries in any way possible that they could. But I can tell you that even though that was 2017, they've been saying that since the 70s. So obviously, there is a problem with phasing out these batteries if there still exist over 2,000 applications for them.
So,
I'm guessing that the main problem is the reliability, that there's just nothing which matches the reliability of these batteries when it comes to military applications.
It bottles down to that, right? Even to the point where you want to be able to reliably be able to push the scuttle button and blow up the missile, so that they want to make sure that that works. So even if their whole intent is just to scare the enemy with a launch and just blow it up later, they want to trust that they can blow it up later. Yeah, it comes bottles down to, yeah, it's that important, gentlemen, and you wouldn't expect anything less.
Yes, and I would also say that when it comes to military application, then money is not a factor almost. They're willing to spend as much as needed in order to have the best materials and the best electronics and whatever.
The ends always somehow justify the means, right? When it comes to the national defense, or at least anybody is within the power seat is willing to use the justification of, we got to do this for national defense or national security, quote unquote, bunny ears, like, because I find that an egregious misuse, because anybody can make up any scenario of a hypothetical that we have to do something for national security and then erode all laws in order to get that done. That's basically where we're at with silver. All the laws of the markets have been eroded to control not just the price. The price is controlled to control the supply.
Yes.
And it's been that way
Before
for a
we
while.
move on, there's one last application we must ask you about, which is very
Okay,
interesting. Something you've written lately about is the use of silver in nuclear reactors.
correct.
Can you tell
So
us a bit about that?
I would love to. So, well, love to is stretching it. I'm more infuriated that this is actually even a thing that our government allowed. But the majority of pressurized, or majority of nuclear reactors that was given to the world post World War II when we, discovered the bomb and then applied this technology to create civilian energy applications in nuclear reactors. We gave this technology to all of NATO, and it just so happened that this particular design by Westinghouse used silver in their control rods. And what is a control rod? A control rod is probably the most important part of the reactor, if we're going to be honest here. It's the thing that makes it so it doesn't blow up. It controls the reaction, the neutrinos, excess neutrinos get absorbed by the control rods so that the reaction within the core is stabilized and it generates the required amount of energy output to boil the steam. And then we make energy. But without the silver, which is a lot because we are generating a lot of energy with these reactor gentlemen, and between 60 to 100, over 100,000 ounces could be put into what is called a control rod assembly, multiple rods that get pushed into the core. At all times, there's a little bit of the tip in the core, and depending on how much energy output they want, the less energy, the more penetrated the rods are. The amount of tonnage, it goes into the thousands of tonnage of silver that has been wasted here because you can't just use these things and they last forever. No, 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 no. There's a certain amount of wear and tear that they can endure, and the manufacturers will tout that there's a longer lifespan than the actual research studies of them looking at actual reactors being them used in practice and seeing that no, there's about a 7 to 9 year lifespan for these things. And when we're done using them, they get entombed. Well, they get put in the pools first, and then the majority of their radioactivity gets dissipated, and then they're safely able to be moved from that point to the long-term storage of what's called tombs, and then they're stuck there for 400 years. So
Yes,
it,
for the sake of our listeners, we'll just stress that once this silver is used inside the reactor, it becomes radioactive, and you can't just recycle it easily. It needs to be put away for hundreds of years until the
case,
radioactivity dissipates.
yeah, and hopefully not that they're melting the silver down and giving it out to the investment community in order to kill us all. I have thought about that, and I don't know anybody out there who has a channel dedicated to this yet, but I would watch a YouTube channel where somebody just took a Geiger counter and scanned their stack and just bought a coin and see if that mint was trying to kill people. I think that would be an exciting piece of content.
Yeah,
Well,
that is
I
kind of
try
a
to toy
creepy.
with that idea, and frankly, it's probably going to be very difficult to pass a radioactive bar. If we stackers don't check for these things, I gather that governments do.
I hope, but I also don't think enough of our government have the realization of how silver is really important and essential. Otherwise, we'd have a stockpile right now of it, and we don't. So that's where I'm afraid that although it makes sense for common sense between you and I because we're a little bit more aware of the situation, they have less awareness.
Yes, that was the next question I wanted to ask you. So, if the military uses so much silver and the military is obviously aware of its importance, why don't they save it or to try to use a little less of it so to make sure that it's going to last?
Because that's not their objective. Their objective is not for the lasting, long prosperity of the United States. When they're done with whatever they're trying to accomplish, they will have a one world government where the problem is then kicked down the road for them to handle. We have to get to that one world government. This is the equivalent of you got to break some eggs to make an omelet, gentlemen.
So it boils down to negligence.
Absolute negligence, and it's a derivative, or the etymology of that is um, is on purpose. The government doesn't want you to know that it's controlling all markets. And I mean, like people are really upset right now about the American aid, right? And Elon went into the office or administration, cut a bunch of American aid, but no one really asked the question, why did that aid even exist in the first place? I know the answer to that. Do either of you?
Well, my understanding is that it's part of the global monetary system. Since the dollar is the global reserve currency, then it needs to, to be delivered to the rest of the world to prevent a deflationary collapse in order to constantly lubricate the system. And I think that spending it on aid, on international aid, is one of the ways in which they send those dollars overseas, and they don't really care what they're used, how they're using those dollars, as long as they constantly deliver enough dollars for the system to remain inflated.
Right. Well, absolutely. The dollar as the world reserve currency always the mother country, if you will, always has to be at a deficit in order to supply that money supply. Absolutely, unequivocally.
Yeah,
But
that's a
that's
feature, not a bug.
exactly part of the game. But specifically, why American aid exists is a derivative of World War II economic plans, the Marshall Plan, which took over Europe. And a part of this plan was to control the resources. And at the time, this was classified, and I found the documents that will be made public of this. But the United States, uh, basically using the threat of nuclear apocalypse with Russia, was managed to put the bomb in all of these European countries of NATO allies and hold them hostage to supply resources whenever needed to the United States to supply this military industrial complex that has persisted since the end of World War II. And that's basically the reason for the manipulation is the United States is controlling all markets in order to subvert and deter Russia and communism from obtaining the ability to take down the United States. It is the Cold War, and it still continues today because whenever you give a power to a government, they never give up that power willingly, ever.
Mhm. Yeah, well, my understanding was that because in ancient times, provinces used to pay taxes to the empire, to Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, it's not politically correct to ask, to demand that the provinces pay tribute.
Well,
So
that's
it was
basically
always my assumption that prices of commodities were managed, at the commodity exchange, so that those states, those countries abroad would be forced to send their resources to the United States for pennies on the dollar, for very low prices. And
mhm.
this is a form of tribute. This is the modern
And in
form of
return,
tribute.
and in
Yes,
return, we
but
give
you're
American
taking
aid.
it you're taking it a few steps further, if I understand correctly.
Yeah. So in return for all the resources of all these countries, we give American aid. And that's why all these crazy programs exist. It's basically to grease the wheels so that we can subvert their laws and their citizens' wealth to be sent to us. whether it's wealth in silver and gold or it's the wealth in commodities that they're extracting that give their country economic value. We are extracting not only the resources, but their labor costs by the suppression of all these commodities. We have it. I feel terrible for what my country has done because the implications of this have hurt and made suffering all over the world so much more great and greater than it could have needed to be.
But isn't that what every empire does?
It well, absolutely, but you
Interesting
would think
point.
that we were at this point of civilization that was more civilized than that of savagery back in that day, but of course not, right? So we have a little bit of growing to do as humanity, but we're not going to get there if we're being kept in the dark until we get to uh, this state of world government, which is basically where we're at now with the UN. And it's just not working for me because it bottles down to a few people dictating the organic growth of the human race. I would like
Right.
to evolve organically, gentlemen. I do not want, say, a crazy ketamine and addicted Elon Musk determining, how I think with his AI. I want to think. I want to be the one to manifest my own destiny. And I think a lot of people do want the option and to participate. I think the world would be better if a lot more people participated.
Yes. I
Right,
would say
absolutely.
I'd be more inclined to support the system if I thought it was stable, if I thought it was well managed at least. And I don't. I think the current monetary system is leading us to some kind of a catastrophe, of an
Yeah,
international catastrophe. This is what I'm even more concerned about. What's going to happen when this system breaks down?
everything's going to fall apart. Like if we need silver to make the GPUs to make memes, we're not going to have memes if we don't represent some sort of acknowledgement to this problem and try to head it off. Unfortunately, this problem is the United States manipulating all markets. It has been doing it since the end of World War II. So all markets, all commodities and their production are effed up, and they will be effed up for a very, very long time. And it makes me angry. It does because I like memes and I like my computer games when I rarely get the chance to play them, but they are enjoyable to me. And being able to also read something on the toilet, anything I want without remembering a book, is very helpful to me. There is a modern comforts that people don't understand that they're going to lose. And the stupid comforts are going away. We're going to the industrial age, if back to the industrial age, if we don't have this commodity. And the problem also is compounded when you realize that your own country is the one that caused the problem. So we're going to get the most hate for this, even though it wasn't the people's fault. But all the other governments around the world are going to be like, yeah, no, we're not going to be listening to you guys anymore or giving you guys the advantage in trade. So at the end of the day, I am shooting my own country in the foot a little bit, but without doing this, we're heading towards a catastrophic issue with supply and all of these things that it probably will create a worse world.
Well, and you do
Yeah.
have to wonder if we're shooting ourselves in the foot anyway. Similar to you, I really don't like the whole globalist agenda, the idea of a one world government. I'm tired of the UN. I'm tired of us being in NATO. You do have to wonder, are some of our enemies actually playing this game better than we are? Are they sucking up more of the silver at these really low prices? Are they actually onboarding more than we are? Because a lot of times when I look around the US, I almost feel like the US is going to end up having to rely on its individual stackers as a long-term stockpile at some point because they're being so wasteful with it.
That's what they're planning. That's what they were going to bank on when they ran out. They were going to come and confiscate it for us, but because I'm going to bring out this information, they're not going to be able to do that with a bunch of pushback because we already know that they're going to do that. This is the problem, gentlemen. They 30 years ago, 40 years ago, these things were already talked about on the House floor. And what are we going to do when we run out of silver? And why aren't we worried about the military not having it? And then all these civilian agencies like the GSA or FEMA were putting out these manipulated studies. I have studies that counter their studies in egregious ways where we were going to run out of silver by 2000. And this was put together by the US Bureau of Mines in 1970. So they knew prior to the Hunt brothers' rise and all of that noise in the 80s that we were running out of silver in less than 20 years. The price didn't go up. And what did they do? They crashed it back down and allowed for a more egregious, greedy sucking of the situation rather than fixing of the situation. But they had to
Let me
do
put it
that.
this way. A, how do you see the end game for the silver market? And how far do you think we are from that end game?
I know it's going to be chaos, and I know that the only supply that is available is what is refined on a daily basis and what stackers hold. Now, my responsibility, that the mantle that I have taken up, is to put out the truth through silverwars.com, to be a good steward of the silver community on Reddit, to put out as much truth about the situation as possible. And the situation bottles down to this: we hold the only resource that the New World Order, or whomever you want to call them, the insiders, need to accomplish their goal. They're going to employ every trick, every psyop, every measure possible. And it's my hope and aspiration to be one step ahead of them, to be able to keep the community informed. So it bottles down to the choice of hold your silver or lose your freedom. That's basically what it bottles down to. Until we expose the corruption, uproot the evil, whatever you want to associate, the name to, Illuminati to insiders, to just the few that benefit from the backs and labor of the many. The system has to change for them to empower the many to be about the individualist, not the collectivist. There is no desire or willpower for somebody to want to, empower the whole if they are suffering along with everybody else. This country was founded on individualism. The pursuit of one's dream is an individual pursuit, not a collective pursuit. And I think that's what made America great. It's the people that formed it. It's the founding fathers that took upon a mantle that no one else wanted to do and did something that they thought was right and put their lives on the line. Freedom is not earned and protected by you sitting on your ass. There is fatigue. If you do not feel fatigue in your daily life, then you are letting your freedoms be eroded. That's the struggle. And not to be, pontific, to be, kind of grandiose, but that's the level of problems here. We do nothing, everything gets worse, or we have to take the responsibility to do something, whatever in our power to do. And in my power, that's forensically looking through microfilms and hunting for the truth, and I have got it. And from here on, I hope that I'm able to influence enough people to do something about it. Otherwise, we're effed. No matter if we hold it or not, the price is going to go wherever it's going to go. The situation is silver is unobtainable.
Well, I will say that I definitely agree with you that there is a lot more to the story of silver than, just investing or just a commodity or just, some industrial applications. It was always my feeling that it is somehow linked to things which are far greater than that. And although I can't say I understand completely the entire picture, I always had that feeling.
There's something happening here. You don't know what it is. There's something happening here. It's always that back of your mind feeling that something is wrong. And it bottles down to there's no real free markets. It's just whatever the government or these high, elite, they call themselves the elite, but it's just the persistently rich bloodlines, to more be apt, that maintain power and influence because they're the ones that are able to buy it.
Yeah, they seem to be have been in control for a very long time.
These people are not on the Forbes list.
I saw an article saying that 68% of the US population is living paycheck to paycheck right now. I don't know if that's a little high. Maybe it is, but the point is, a lot of these people out there are in a situation where they're struggling to pay their bills. There was people taking out debt to buy Christmas presents last winter, and there's only so many things that they can use to protect themselves going forward. A lot of the high interest savings accounts or money markets, they want you to have a minimum amount of money to invest in there. They want you to have $5,000, $10,000. These people don't have that money anymore. They're not going to be able to go out and buy a big piece of property somewhere that's going to maintain its value well. This is it. This is what they can do. They can make a sandwich at home that would cost them 70 cents to make, and they skip the $14 lunch at the drive-through, and then they could go buy uh, one silver half dollar, with that money. And if they repeat that, then they can at least protect some of their wealth. And I think that a big part of what the PSYOP has been is keeping the lid on this situation, um, keeping people in the dark so they're not aware that they could slowly be accumulating this, even if they're broke, even if they are living to paycheck, they could figure out how to slowly accumulate this. If they're alive, they could get a little silver.
And the biggest apprehension people have to, they hear that silver has reached the all-time high of $50, but way back in the past, it's not that worth that now. So all of this talk that we're talking about right now is all fake, trying to sell the bullion. I don't care ultimately if people take it upon me to buy bullion because new people getting into this doesn't matter anymore. It's only what people currently hold that exists. So if you're willing to find somebody out there that is willing to sell you their bullion, I'm going to say the seller is retarded, and that's the absolute truth. Not to regarded. Sorry, YouTube. But silver is so much more valuable based on how much manipulation has gone into suppressing its price. And the price itself has been a mechanism to control the amount of investment enthusiasm to take physical off the market. So if people want to know why the price is the way it is, it's low for industry, it makes them happy, and it causes investors to be demoralized into selling this valuable and precious commodity that all of governments want you to sell. If you want to do something of complete rebellion, keep your silver and buy more silver. This is the ultimate thing of patriotism you can do to a corrupt government right now, and they're all corrupt.
It really is the best way to stick it to the system, so to speak.
Yeah, because eventually they can't gaslight anymore when industry, not relating to the military, aren't able to get their silver. And this goes into medical usages, from burns to infection creams to bandages and surgical equipment to tools that we would lose the ability to diagnose problems with. There is a lot of usages in silver for medical that will have detrimental effects, if not for the consumer of technology. It's going to be seen eventually. We just have to hold on for dear life.
Well, I really appreciate both of you being here tonight. It was great to speak with both of you. Thanks to everyone who watched this video. I do appreciate it. Don't forget to check out their links in the description.
Okay.
Just thank you for sharing your thoughts, your perspective. It's certainly different than what we encounter day to day.
My pleasure. I want to say for the record that I am not suicidal. I have no desire to kill myself whatsoever. That if I suffer some heart attack, I have no history of this in my family, and that I more than likely got the ice bullet. And I do not plan to be traveling anytime soon. I literally am going to live in my bunker And I just hope enough people will get this information out so that I can eventually maybe take a vacation 20 years from now, but then get the ice bullet. This is my
Well,
sacrifice. I
well,
love you all.
stay safe, my man. And everyone who watched today, I hope you all have a great day out there.